Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Political Frenemies. This is the first episode of our second year, and if you're new to the podcast, well, first of all, where on earth have you been? But if you are new to us, we are the podcast where a Conservative and Liberal Democrat, and usually a guest, debate the week's news very robustly, but remain friends at the end. How's about that? Pretty unique, eh? I'm Mathew Hulbert. I'm a Lib Dem activist and former Lib Dem councillor. My fellow co-host, the other guy over there, is Dr. Chris Newton, academic and former defence policy advisor to the Conservatives the last time they were in opposition. And we've got a brand new guest for our first show of our second year. We're very, very pleased to welcome Tom Willerton-Gartside, researcher and campaigner. Now, that's a very brief introduction, but we're going to find out a little bit more about Tom in just a second. But first of all, I'd best just ask him, Dr. Chris, how are you?
I'm good, yeah, busy as always, but there's no rest for the wicked there. Yeah, I'm good. How are you, good sir?
I'm very well. It's been a busy week and I've got a busy day. So just to let our viewers and listeners in on this, because we like taking them behind the scenes, ordinarily we record on a Friday evening at 6 p.m. But because I'm so much of a social butterfly today, I'm actually heading off to Birmingham this evening to an awards do with our mutual friend Andy Chandler, who has been a guest on this pod before and will be again. And then we're having to record at 9 a.m. instead on Friday because I've also got a busy day ahead as well. So just busy, Chris. And but of course, always time to fit you in.
Yeah. Because you need a dose of wisdom on a Friday, don't you? So,
yes.
Happy to provide it.
A dose of right-wing wisdom. Yes, quite right. So let's turn to our guest. Tom, great to have you on. Really do appreciate it. I know that, you know, when I get in contact with people, I think they probably have never heard of us. So it's good of you to come on. Tell us a little bit about you and about how you're involved in politics. Thanks.
So first of all, thank you for having me on. At the moment, I'm working with a few different groups working on public opinion, especially people outside of London. How do they think? What are they talking about? Also thinking or researching what we do on economic growth, what is most important to people, how do we solve crime, a whole different bunch of issues. Only briefly started working in British politics in recent months, previously working in American politics. And yeah, I'm 22, so just starting my career, hopefully.
Gosh, 22, Dr. Chris, do you remember those days? Oh my goodness!
Just about, yeah.
so I honestly, genuinely cannot believe that I'm 45 now. I just, 20 years have just gone by so quickly, but starting to feel it more and more.
Yeah.
Starting to feel it more and more every day. So Tom, I mean, just for our viewers and listeners, I mean, where would you say you sit politically? What are your personal politics?
So at the last general election, I voted Conservative through gritted teeth. Not that I particularly wanted to, but in my local constituency, which used to be a Tory safe seat, the polls were indicating that Labour might win, and I think it came down to a recount. So I voted Conservative. My local MP, by the way, for everyone, is Graham Stewart for Beverley and Holderness. And now, I would say I'm on the right of politics, and I'm a libertarian. I would class myself as, but I don't particularly identify with the Conservative Party anymore.
Which is interesting in of itself, and maybe we shall get into that a little bit later on. Well, Tom, it's really good to have you with us. Thanks for being on. We're looking forward to the debate today. So what are we talking about today? Well, of course, the prisoner release fiasco. I'm sure we've all got strong opinions on that. Then Reeves and Farage on the economy. A number of interesting things being said and flags being waved. We'll get to that. Villa Park protests last night. I know Dr. Chris especially has got thoughts on that. I've then got a little treat for you, and especially for Dr. Chris, from last Saturday's East Midlands Lib Dems conference Chris lives for my videos from Lib Dem conferences. Then we'll be discussing, can the British left learn from Mamdani's victory? I think we have got things to learn. And then we'll have a word about Remembrance Sunday this Sunday. So if everyone's happy, let's do it. So we'll start off with what has indeed been a fiasco. This prisoner release issue that has seen a number of prisoners released before they should be, and I think someone put it down to like admin error and human error, but can we really afford to have that when it comes to releasing prisoners? Now, I know the way the media likes to frame this, and no doubt Dr. Chris will tell me that they're entirely right to do so, is that it's all the more scary and all the more wrong because these are foreign criminals, etc. I just think it's wrong if prisoners are being released, whoever they are, before their allotted time that has been put forth by the courts. But go on then, Dr. Chris. Tell us exactly why this is a scandal.
Yeah, I mean, there are two elements to this. Firstly, there is obviously the actual release, the wrongly release, and we had two high-profile cases this week, and this is on the back of Hadush Gibatu the week before, who was wrongly released and eventually found and entered prison and actually was deported, and I think they paid him £500 for the pleasure as well. But this this seems to be carrying on in terms of wrongfully arresting people. Actually, the figures for 2024 to 25 has shot up. Is I think about 128% increase on from the 24-25 on the last financial year. So this does illustrate some real problems with the prison service and the Ministry of Justice. But there's obviously a political angle as well, and especially at Prime Minister's questions, where James Cartledge, the Shadow Defence Secretary, who was deputising this week, and David Lammy was deputising for the government, where James Cartledge asked a number of times, Lammy, are there any other instances in which you're aware of, in terms of wrongful release? And David Lammy repeatedly refused to answer the question, and it turned out that what was breaking at that time was a foreign prisoner wrongfully being released. And so there's question marks about, well, what did David Lammy knew? Was he briefed beforehand? And David Lammy's overall performance at Prime Minister's questions as well, which was extremely defensive, very aggressive, and he just completely bombed in his kind of audition at the dispatch box at Prime Minister's questions. So I wondered what you, Mathew and Tom, thought about Lammy's performance this week and how Lammy's handling it in general.
Well, just before I come to Tom in a second, I just want to probe you a little bit more on Prime Minister's questions, Chris, because, yes, I mean, I think that David Lammy could have handled the whole session, indeed, a bit better than he did. But equally, come on, Chris, let's be honest, the Tory guy, who I said perhaps a little bit unfairly on social media, is I doubt he's even a household name in his own household. I mean, I'd literally never heard of him before. But he rather cocked up, didn't he? He obviously knew this information, and from what I gather, was meant to land the killer blow, so to speak, in the last question, but then found out that he'd already asked all of his questions. And, I mean, talk about incompetence. I mean, get with it, guys. I mean, if you're going to build up to landing a killer blow, it shouldn't be having to be done in a point of order after the session has finished and the cameras have largely stopped rolling. I mean, that wasn't great, was it, on the Tories' perspective?
Yeah, I mean, he obviously messed up there, and he obviously lost count of how many questions he was asking. but ultimately, at the end of the day, he got Lammy. It didn't answer the question, but if he, if he knew beforehand, if he was briefed beforehand, as has been reported, that this prisoner had been released, and he didn't disclose that information to Parliament, then there are serious question marks about about whether he's misled the House or not. Now Lammy's lucky in the sense that we've got a mini recess and there's a bit of a breather for him. But I'm sure on I think it's Tuesday when Parliament returns, there's going to be questions about what Lammy knew and what he said, and that's why Lammy chickened out of a further series of questioning later on was it Wednesday, because it was reported it would have been deemed career suicide. So there are issues there in terms of what Lammy knew and what he told Parliament at Prime Minister's questions.
Okay, Tom?
Well, I think first of all, to say that it's a classic example of mass institutional failure. I mean, what a scandal is almost not been spoken about enough is that it took almost a week for the prison service to inform the Metropolitan Police. I think that really needs to be spoken about a lot more. And notwithstanding that, 128% increase under Labour, I think as of David Lammy in the House, we've been playing this in focus groups this week, and I think he sums up why a lot of people in the country have lost trust in politicians. It was disastrous. His aggressive nature, the way he addressed James Cartledge, and the fact that he couldn't answer a question that he should have. He could quite easily have made a statement. It would have actually helped the Metropolitan Police's search if they had announced, or if he had announced that he was missing or that he'd been accidentally released. And to not do that really is shameful from David Lammy.
Yes, and I must admit, I was just sat here thinking that actually, if he had have said, either in his opening statement that the person answering Prime Minister's questions gets to make, or in answer to James Cartledge's first question, if he'd kind of acted in a statesman-like way and said, I have this information, this shouldn't have happened, I'm absolutely furious about it. Straight after Prime Minister's questions, I, as the Justice Secretary, I'm going to go and demand answers, etc., etc., etc. Of course, it wouldn't have been good for the government. It wouldn't have been good. There's no good way the government could have got out of that PMQs. But it would have answered the question. James Cartledge, I expect, then would not have known what he was doing. And the situation would have been different. It wouldn't have been good for the government, but it would have been different. Instead, we had this performance from David Lammy, which didn't come across very well, I think, to most people. And he refused to answer a question that, by all reporting, he knew the answer of. So the answer to. So I mean, it wasn't good at all. But equally, I think that. It wasn't a particularly good look for the Tories. I mean, stay on top of how many questions you're asking, guys. Really. But there's no doubt about it that it's still leading the news. I think pretty much today. So it's clearly had a political impact. Dr. Chris, I just want to ask you. David Lammy did make quite an interesting point, which is. Why wasn't the Shadow Justice Secretary asking the questions? That is, of course, a certain Robert Jenrick, Esquire. And I think we all know the reason why he wasn't asking the questions, and that is because Kemi Badenoch fears that he's her natural successor, right?
Yeah, there's something in that, but at the same time, I don't think Badenoch in the past has necessarily put the shadow to that particular minister in that position, in that deputising position at Prime Minister's questions. So yes, you can read something into it, but at the end of the day, Kemi's has done, has made a number of choices. Returning to the government, there seems to be a pattern with the government now, with Labour ministers, in that whenever they're in trouble, they're overly aggressive, they're very defensive. They hide behind process, which was what Lammy did. He said, well, I couldn't release the information. then because the police wouldn't want me to do it, and the police ultimately said, no, we have no problems with Lammy releasing the information at Prime Minister's questions, and they evade responsibility and blame the previous Tory government, which, yes, the Tories do have a role here in terms of how the system has been handled over the years in which they were in government. But at the same time, Labour has been in government for a year. They have made decisions themselves on prisons which people have disagreed with in terms of early release schemes and so forth. And I think it's time that they should take responsibility. I mean, what has Shabana Mahmood been doing in that department for the past year? I mean, what was she doing? So they've got to, at some point, they've got to take responsibility. And if you don't admit something's wrong and there's something wrong with your own administration, your own handling of these things, then you can never improve. And that's what concerns me about Labour at the moment, is that they're just not accepting any responsibility or any means in which the way in which they handle things can be improved.
Well, I mean, I think I obviously broadly agree with what you're saying, and I always find myself in a slightly odd situation of feeling like there should be someone on at least trying to give a defence of the government, and I often find myself having to attempt to do that just to play devil's advocate. I mean, what Shabana Mahmood would no doubt say, Chris, is that she inherited a mess when it came to the prison system from the last Conservative government, and spent a considerable amount of time trying to sort that mess out. I mean, there effectively was no prison places left after the Tory years. So, I mean, I don't think this is on the broader issue of prison places, I don't think this is the Tories' strongest card. And this is the trouble for the Tories on so many matters now, is that the government just points out to their record, which in all too many cases was, I'd argue at least, lamentable. And that means that, they have a tougher time in trying to tackle the government on these matters. So, I mean, Tom,
I agree with that. So I agree with that, but
Okay.
It won't wash forever for Labour. It won't wash forever.
No, I absolutely agree. So, Tom, what do we do about the practical issue of, because, we're all human beings, and no matter how good the system is, in any walk of life or workplace, mistakes will be made because we're human beings. I mean, is there any kind of process that can be put in place that would stop that, prevent that being the case?
Well, I think crucially we've got to remember that everything is a choice from our politicians. They have chosen to neglect the prison service. They have chosen to let problems develop at Chelmsford and at Wandsworth. They can sack, heads should roll in this scenario. I think it's not to do with necessarily the process, as you say. It was supposedly human error. But you've got to ask the question: is when there are so many scandals at Wandsworth and Chelmsford over multiple years across multiple governments, that indicates to me that it's the government can control the prison service. The government can sack people. Parliament is sovereign. They can pass legislation to make sure that they can get rid of people as and when. The fact that they aren't doing that shows a lack of responsibility and a lack of understanding that they actually can control the system if they want to, but they don't want to, or at least they're not showing that they want to. And fundamentally, until they do that, we will see scandal after scandal, Labour lurching from crisis to crisis, like the Tories were lurching from crisis to crisis. As you said, it's not just a Labour thing. The Labour and the Tories have essentially produced much of the same issues, and until we get a government that actually wants to control the government, things won't change, I don't think.
And Tom, I don't know if you saw the footage this week from ITV News, I think it was, their exclusive, of one of these prisoners, kind of casually taking himself back off to prison to hand himself back in and kind of posing for the cameras and all of that. And I did think this is grotesque. I mean, this is someone who should be serving his sentence. Has been let out in error and is now in full view of the press, swanning off back to take himself back to not being hauled back, but swanning in of his own accord with his girlfriend, I think. And I did kind of, even me, a woolly-hearted liberal, and I absolutely am that, thought that this is just pretty darn unacceptable. And I guess, Tom, that you have to think about the victims of whatever crimes these people committed. People want to, often people want to see harsher sentences. I'm not sure that's always the best answer, but people certainly want to see people serving the time that they've been allotted to serve. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, William Smith, the fact that he was released on the same day that he was actually convicted of 4 years in prison, I don't know how anybody has not thought that that was crazy. It stinks of institutional failure, as we've said. And whether or not we agree on whether people should be serving longer or shorter sentences, the fact that 90 violent prisoners have been released since Labour took charge, that's one in 800 prisoners are now mistakenly released. This is extremely problematic for the government. They've lost control of crime in this country, and I think that unless they want to empower the police and the justice system to actually do their jobs, to actually lock up prisoners. We've got to remember that most crime is committed by career criminals. If we give career criminals longer sentences, we can protect the public. And until the government wants to do that, or show that they are willing to do that, and make the harsh or necessary decisions to be able to make sure that these things happen, really worrying times for the country when our streets are getting less safe, seemingly every day.
And Chris, just coming to you, I don't know if you saw that footage and what your thoughts were if you did, but it certainly doesn't look good. But yet again, as a Lib Dem, I find myself saying, well, a pox on both of your houses, Labour and Conservatives. I mean, neither have got to grips with this issue.
Yeah, and I would agree with the Tories. I mean, one of my motivating factors when I was Tom's age, many years ago now, in terms of becoming a Conservative activist, was on crime. There was a violent crime problem in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I thought the Conservatives were the best party to sort it out, and they were extremely disappointing over those years, and it would be nice to have a party that will advocate what Tom has said with regards to criminal justice. So I would agree. Yes, the Tories have a lot of questions to answer for as well, but Labour's got to take responsibility now. They can't just play that card every single time, and I think people are beginning to see through it.
Just on that, you just made me think, Chris, that we've not really, as of yet at least, heard much, or at least I haven't, heard much from Reform on Law and Order. Do you? Well, actually, they having said that, I've just remembered now they did a whole summer on it, so apologies. We have heard much from Reform on. I've slept since then. We have heard from Reform on Law and Order. Do you think that this will be another reason why some people choose to turn to them politically?
Yeah, as Tom said at the start, is like, well, people were disillusioned with how the Tories handled things, and here's something different, coming along that's seemingly more authentic, and therefore that's why Farage and Reform is leading in the polls, and I think that summer where they really did major on crime will appeal a lot of small c ideological Conservative voters.
Right. Let's turn to the economy now, and of course, more than anything else, even perhaps more than Law and Order, this will be what the next election is decided on. The famous Bill Clinton line: "It's the economy, stupid." And we've seen we've had interventions on the economy from Rachel Reeves, of course, the Chancellor, and Nigel Farage. Also, in fact, Kemi Badenoch as well, I think, made some comments that I don't think got a massive lot of attention on the economy. Tom, obviously very heavy hints from Rachel Reeves that taxes are going to have to go up and that she's going to be breaking her fiscal rules, and indeed manifesto commitments. And it was a pretty unprecedented speech, right? A few weeks out from a budget.
Yeah, I mean, she's tried to pitch roll some tax rises. I think what is reported this morning, 2p increase in income tax and a 2p drop in national insurance for everyone earning less than £50,000. But fundamentally, she knows, and I think the rest of the country knows, that Labour promised change and have delivered anything but. We are, still in the same old tired debates about tax, spend, black holes, how much it is. Last year it was supposedly 22 billion. Now they've changed their mind. Now it's apparently 40 billion, even though she said it was a once in a parliament budget. But again, the fundamental choice, or the politicians are continuing to have the wrong debates. The way to improve the economy, regardless of whatever your view on the role of the state and the responsibility of Britain in the world, the best way to achieve those goals is through economic growth. And we have no party taking economic growth seriously. Whether you want, to make society so-called more, or supposedly more fair, or at least more economically equal, the best way to do that is to increase the size of the pie. If we want to be at the forefront of human development going forward, again, the best way is to have enough money and enough entrepreneurs in this country. But we can't do that if we're constantly in a doom loop of tax and spend and talking about black holes. And ultimately, the Chancellor is, she's just moving money around. She's tried to raise more, but ultimately, the way she's going about it, and the way politicians have gone about it for decades now, and their choices have delivered crime, grime, and decline for the country. And until we get a government that takes it seriously, and is prepared to make the really hard choices on, for example, the triple lock, we will not change the fortunes of this country.
And Tom, you're involved in this, I think, relatively new group, Looking for Growth, right? And what is the aim of? I mean, I guess it's on the name of the tin there. But what is that group hoping to achieve, and how?
Well, first of all, obviously, as we said, economic growth is to shift the Overton window, to move the debate. This is a political movement. I had a speech a couple of weeks ago. Matt Clifford, I think, put it very well, the former director at the AI Institute, to make Britain rich again. To actually, we can have 3, 4, 5% growth every year. That should be what we expect of our politicians. That should be what we want. But instead, Labour at the start of the year were boasting about the fact that we had 0. Whatever it was % growth. That people do not feel that, and the fact that they tried to make out that somehow this was brilliant is really simply for the birds. Is terrible, and until we get a government that actually priorities economic growth and acts like it actually wants economic growth rather than just saying so. Those are the problems that Looking for Growth is trying to solve. And the problem really is that incremental reforms on tax, spend, planning, as Labour have tried to do, the Tories are suggesting, reforms sometimes at local level are supposedly NIMBYs, and at national level are supposedly YIMBYs. None of these things will work. The answer is, in Whitehall, the default answer has to be yes, not no. At the moment, they're looking for an excuse to block things. The default answer is that we should be backing our wealth creators, our risk takers, our entrepreneurs, and at the moment, and for decades really, successive governments have failed repeatedly, and now we're seeing the fruits of their labour, or rather, not fruits, how terrible they have been.
But you're not suggesting, I assume, that we have another go at the Liz Truss experiment, are you?
No, not in the... Well, first of all, Liz Truss, she unfairly, I think, with the quantitative tightening that was started the day before by the Bank of England, I'm not suggesting for one moment that we go back to Liz Truss, because, again, Liz Truss did not fundamentally want to change the debate. What really we need to change the debate is so that we decrease regulation significantly. We cut red tape so that Britain can build again. I think we're well under targets everywhere for house building. that quite simply is not good enough. We don't have to accept astronomical energy prices, house prices going through the roof, rent increasing. It doesn't have to be this way. The politicians have made choices, and their choices have led to these problems that we are now seeing on our streets daily. It's completely ridiculous that politicians are somehow trying to blame somebody else. When our taxes are delivering less, when the streets are getting less safe, when people cannot achieve things in their life that their parents used to achieve, that is on them. I think a lot of Westminster seem to blame it on someone else, seem to think it's always external events. No, the real answer is that they made the choices. I think you've got to remember that everything is a choice. They've chosen the easy way out. They've chosen to prioritise their dinner parties and small interest groups over the prosperity of the British people, and it's time that the politicians actually prioritised real people over NIMBYs.
So, Chris, it's an interesting argument that Tom makes there, and I think one that you would largely agree with. I thought there was an interesting intervention this week. I don't know if either of you guys saw it. I was geek watching BBC Parliament, and I saw George Osborne and Vince Cable appearing before the Treasury Select Committee, talking about their time, of course, in coalition government, 10 and a bit years on, but also reflecting on what's set to happen at the budget. And I thought Vince Cable made a really interesting point when, and I tweeted about this, when he said, Chris, that people expect Scandinavian levels of public service, but aren't prepared to pay Scandinavian levels of tax. And we can talk about the politicians, and we should, but maybe kind of we, the voting and tax-paying public, need to recognise that we've got to play our part too, and that might just mean being taxed a bit more.
Well, that assumes that if you tax more, you're automatically going to get a far superior level of service, and that hasn't happened. That hasn't even happened under, over the past few years when we've increased taxes. Taxes have increased, and yet services are at their worst point, as far as in my lifetime. So I don't accept the premise that if you spend more, you necessarily get a better quality of service. The debate should be about efficiency and how much bang you can get for your buck. So again, it's kind of, we're having the same debates and having the same assumptions about we need to increase tax, we need to increase spending, we need to increase borrowing, and no one's really prepared to look at this and think differently and to come up with sort of radical solutions. Now, Matthew, you did say, well, what about Liz Truss? But even Liz Truss was forced to accept the pressure that was put on by Labour and the Liberal Democrats about a massive energy support scheme, which forms the biggest spending item of that Liz Truss budget, but that no one talks about. It was actually that that big
it's all
energy subsidy.
Yeah.
So again, even Liz Truss was forced to accept political pressure on making some kind of massive spending commitment. So we do need to have a real out of the box sort of thinking and get ourselves out of this second era of consensus, which is about more taxes, more spending, and so forth. But Labour isn't prepared to do that, and Labour's just resorting to the same old answers again. And the reason why people like me and Tom are very pessimistic at the moment is that we don't see anything different sort of coming on the horizon for at least another 4 years. So we're going to be stuck with this same policy, which has been tried again for the past few decades, and we're going to get the same result, and it's just going to get even worse.
Well, I would argue, and I appreciate that I'm very much in a minority on this panel, but I would argue that what we need to see is more funding on public services. I certainly think that on the NHS we're significantly below the European average on spend for health services, and yet actually, and people who say it's not achievable, it is achievable, and the last Labour government, to be fair to them, did it and got us up to the European average on health spending. And I think people need to, the Lib Dems famously under Paddy Ashdown had actually what became quite a popular policy of 1p on income tax to help fund public services. I think if governments make the case for why extra taxes are needed, most fair-minded people will accept that, as long as it's as long as it's mostly those with the broadest shoulders being taxed a bit more. But this, let's have a proper social democratic argument be put forward by what is supposedly a social democratic government. But I would argue they're just not quite brave enough to make that argument. And so, they gave themselves these fiscal rules, which they didn't have to do. Labour were going to win the last election. They didn't have to box themselves in like they have. And each time I see Rachel Reeves on TV now, she looks more kind of I don't know what the word is, more kind of depressed and deer in the headlights than the previous time that I've seen her. So I mean, I'd argue, I know you two wouldn't, but I'd argue, let's have this Labour government be a proper Labour government and argue for. I mean, it's interesting, Chris, that Rachel Reeves did hint at this kind of argument when she said it needs to be a national effort now to turn things around. And I mean, I think it's probably too late actually for her to make that argument. But if they'd have made that argument at the start of this government, then they might be in a bit of a better position now. The trouble is they're neither fair nor foul. They're neither social democratic nor obviously what you'd consider traditionally conservative. So I don't really think they're pleasing anyone at the moment.
Yeah, it was an interesting pitch, wasn't it? We screwed up. Now everybody has to do their bit to help us dig us out of the hole that we dug. And yes, there was an economic legacy left by the previous government. We have to acknowledge that. But there were things that Labour did in the previous. It was in the previous budget as well, which made things worse. All the extra spending that it did, the tax rises, especially on national insurance, which is an absolute jobs killer. And I could see even in the shopping centre line that I usually go to, so more shops closing and units being boarded up. So again, it's this issue that Labour's resorting to the same kind of old arguments, and also as I've said at the start, they've got to take responsibility as well. Some of their policies are contributing to this, but in that speech she was blaming pretty much everybody and everything. So Brexit, austerity. At one thought, I thought she was going to blame the Wall Street crash. Labour might as well do that because they seem to go back in history and blame everything else. And until Labour realise it's their own policies that are creating this concern among business and investors, then nothing's going to improve.
Tom, we also saw an intervention from Nigel Farage on the economy this week, and I went through all the news channels, and there was his face blaring out at us. And I did tweet that if Ed Davey, which let's just remember, at the moment has 72 MPs when Reform has 5, if he made a major intervention on the economy, I doubt it'd get any coverage at all. And I do think there's something wrong with our political coverage, but that's a little bit by the by.
What's he going to say that's different than what Labour's going to do? It's like he's got to say something different, hasn't he? Sorry, so I don't mean to eat into Tom's time, but
it's all right.
Anyway,
but Tom, never mind my gripes as a Lib Dem. What did you make of what Farage was saying? It was interesting that he felt he needed to make a pitch on the economy, right? Because that's perhaps an area where Reform is least trusted.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I'm finding in a group state. People are still unsure about Farage. though, are increasingly sure because the rest of the parties have failed. But I thought it was encouraging, to say the least. The intervention 2 weeks ago by Danny Kruger and his new department was encouraging again. I think they're reasonable and realistic moves. And the fact, as you spoke about Labour boxing themselves in at the last election, the fact that Richard Tice has gone on news channels and talked about thinking again about the triple lock and thinking about making those hard decisions is encouraging, because the triple lock by 2030 will cost £15.5 billion a year. That is 3 times more than forecasted, and is plainly unaffordable. But I was encouraged. I think it's unhelpful to see Farage as a right wing libertarian or small c conservative. I think more like a status quo versus radical policies is more the way to see politics these days. One thing I would say though is that I need to see him tell a story more. I don't think he's laying out a vision of what is wrong with the country. I don't think he's laying out he's laying out, we need to deport more people, we need to cut crime, increase economic growth. I can see that, but I can't see a full story, a full vision, because ultimately, as you've said, the next election will predominantly be fought on the economy, and I think really for Reform to win, they need to make the economy their strongest subject. That is the thing they should be talking about. They should be going after Labour and the Tories on. The Lib Dems, as you said, if they actually adopted any policies different to Labour, then maybe they would get more airtime. But fundamentally, I think really Farage, they are a start-up party, as we know, and I will cut them some slack, but eventually we need to see them tell a story more about what it is that they view the country as. How do they see our role in the world? Do they see us as a world-class education system? Do they think that we should be the startup capital of Europe? Those are the things that we should be talking about, and how they will achieve them. They will have to make tough calls. They will have to make unpopular decisions on policy. I think one of the most important things is not to pull a policy just as a policy on its own. It has to be a package delivered, and then you can see if people if they are promising to scrap the triple lock, for example, but promising less taxes. Are people going to be more satisfied with that? Those are the decisions that they will have to take, and no doubt they will take them as a long way to the next election. But yeah, I think Farage is doing. In fact, I actually went for lunch with a Tory MP a couple of weeks ago, and he said to me that if I was Reform, or if I was an advisor to Reform, they are doing exactly the playbook that I would suggest, and I think that can be more high praise.
Chris, just one final question on the economy, because then we do have to move on. Got about 10 minutes left before I need to poodle off for the rest of my day. It did seem to indicate a little bit of a change, though, for Farage. Previously, and we've talked about this on the pod, it seemed to me that Reform were trying to do this thing of kind of economically actually really quite left and culturally quite right. It did seem to indicate, and some other podcasts were making this point this week, a return to a more kind of, well, I guess you'd call it a more kind of traditional, small government, low tax position, no?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I think his pitch this week was, we're going to be economically responsible. We're not going to, announce kind of a whole blitz, or we're growing back on the blitz of different economic policies, particularly on tax cuts and so forth. But I think it goes back to the previous point in that there has to be coherence behind what Farage is doing, not just policy here and there, not just announcing policy 4 years out from an election and then rowing back on some of it. There has to be a coherent vision, a coherent set of policies underpinned by a coherent philosophy. And that has been Farage and Reform's a big weakness, I think, is that it is a bit here and there and pick and mix kind of policy making. So that's what they need to work on. They need to work on creating something that is coherent, that makes sense, and then once you've sorted that out, then you can put it in a way in which you can sell to the public.
And also, I'd just end by commenting on the fact that I still think it's very much a one-man band. I still think it gets the coverage it does because it's Nigel Farage. I think if it was anyone else from Reform, the broadcasters wouldn't be as bothered about that. And I think that is a problem for him as well. Chris, you wanted to say a few words on the situation at Villa Park last night.
Yeah, I mean, we covered this, was it a couple of weeks ago, where it was announced that Tel Aviv Maccabi fans were not allowed to attend this football match between them and Aston Villa because of security concerns and so forth. And the match was played last night. And there was protests outside the ground, outside Villa Park, and these were sort of pro-Palestine protesters, and the scenes, they were sort of very aggressive in the manner in which they were protesting, and just the scenes of because there were sort of Jewish supporters. Who managed to get tickets, and British Jewish and supporters of British Jews and Israel and so forth managed to get tickets and were able to get into the ground. But they were escorted through this fence, and behind the fence you had the protesters sort of shouting sort of anti-Semitic abuse to them and so forth. I just thought the scenes were absolutely disgraceful, and this scenes of Jews being escorted through this sort of series of fences. It's just what has Britain in 2025 come to? I just think it was a really disgraceful scene, and it doesn't bode well, and it's very concerning. So that's what I just wanted to register my concern and just sheer disgust at what at the scenes that unfolded last night.
Well, just due to time, if it's okay, I'm going to leave that one there. So Chris, last Saturday I took myself off to beautiful Matlock in Derbyshire for East Midlands Liberal Democrats conference, and it was great to see friends and colleagues old and new. And I made a couple of speeches there. You'd have loved them, Chris. I talked about the emergency care crisis, obviously very dear to my heart as an issue after what happened to my dear mum. And then I also did an amendment to a public transport motion as well. And just for you, Chris, because I know how much you love them, I recorded a little video from East Midlands Lib Dem's conference. So let's take a look at that now.
Hi folks, it's Matthew here, and I'm really chuffed to be recording this little exclusive video for Political Frenemies from East Midlands Lib Dem's conference in Matlock in Derbyshire. I know that Dr. Chris will just be absolutely delighted to have some more Lib Dem content on Political Frenemies. He lives for it, really. So good to be here with fellow Lib Dems from right across the East Midlands. We're in good heart. The party is in good heart at the moment. Party's doing well in terms of local council by-election success, and we're sure that that is going to be happening here in the East Midlands too, because we work really hard to do as much as we can to ensure that it will. Earlier on today, here at the conference here in Matlock, I successfully moved a motion on emergency care, obviously an issue which is very personal to me after what happened to my dear mum back in 2022. That was passed unanimously by conference, so really chuffed about that. That will now go on to the party nationally and federally to think about and potentially be the basis of a future national motion at conference, which is fantastic. And then later today, I'm moving an amendment on a public transport motion here at conference. So really busy, really packed day. Great to be with so many friends, old and new, and the Lib Dems in good heart here in the East Midlands.
So there you go, Chris. Did you like that little exclusive from Lib Dem Conference? Did you wish you were there?
Yeah, I'm really jealous, Matthew, that I couldn't be there and I couldn't engage in the debate and make a contribution. So yeah,
Well, well,
I'm
actually,
sad.
indeed. Actually, Chris, and I don't want to say too much about this because we've got to make sure that it happens. But if I can put it this way. Not that Chris is suddenly changing his political colours, because he obviously absolutely isn't. But you might find yourself at a future Lib Dem conference with this podcast. Oh, I'll leave that just floating in the air there. We'll see what happens. Now let's turn to perhaps one of the big international stories of the week, and that is Mamdani's win, massive win, in overwhelming win in New York City. And this has sent the political right, especially Donald Trump, and much of the political centre stir crazy this week that an avowed socialist would win an election. But it's happened, and I think it has things to teach the British left. So I'm very interested to get you two's perspective on this. Tom, let's start with you.
First of all, I think that there's not really many lessons, or we shouldn't really particularly be worried by this. Obviously, New York is full of university graduates who have been brainwashed by the American education system there. And in any case, I think these elections, particularly with the Trump base, is about propensity, and a thing that the Republicans have to worry about going into 2028 is how do they get Trump voters who voted for him in 2016 and 2024 in particular to turn out in elections that don't have him on the ballot. And the Democrats had sweeping victories across the board on Tuesday night, but these are these are high propensity elections, only extremely engaged voters voting, and I don't think that if the left do take lessons from him, we're all the better for it. I don't think that his policies appeal to the British voter.
Well, I mean, I guess I was thinking more, not so much about his policy stances, but about the way that he conducted the campaign, the fact that he was energetic, that he had a very good kind of ground game in terms of social media, that he was an appealing character. If you could get beyond his politics, which you either do or don't agree with, I thought that he was someone who was young and was charismatic and was going up against the political establishment that people. I mean, in a sense, I mean, the irony is that there is a parallel to Farage in as much as only this, and indeed to Zach Polanski of the Greens as well, is that people are sick to death, rightly or wrongly, people are sick to death, Chris, of the political establishment. And if you can show that you are not that is a pretty good place to start for most voters.
Yeah, that's definitely the mood at the moment, and I certainly would agree that obviously he's a very charismatic figure, and he's he's a very good deliverer of speeches. Whether or not the Labour or the Lib Dems can learn anything from this, well, I suppose it's like trying to learn from the Greens in Brighton or Sadiq Khan in London. We are talking about a very liberal left-wing voter base there. Perhaps there is one serious point about kind of the youth vote and how much the youth vote is voting left-wing. Tom will have much more insight into this than I do, sort of given that I'm far removed from being one of the youth today, but certainly the point about being the capture of the education institutions by the left, I think is valid, and especially now that this week you have Bridget Phillipson's education curriculum reforms as well, which is basically dumbing down the curriculum and making it more left wing. So that would be even more of a concern, and once kids are educated to 16, they get to vote Labour or whoever left-wing party at 16. So there is, I know I'm kind of joking there, but there is a serious point that there does seem to be, according to the polls, quite a considerable youth favouritism towards, especially more radical left-wing parties like the Greens.
Tom, just on that, and it will have to be very briefly if you don't mind. I mean, is Zach Polanski the British Mamdani?
In a word, no, definitely not. I think a lot of young people prefer Farage by quite a distance, and I don't think Polanski's the Polanski's will not appeal to the voters in 4 years' time.
Well, I mean, I'll just end this segment by saying that actually I think certainly the British Lib Dems have more to learn from D66's victory in the Netherlands, the Social Liberal Party there, and the guy who is set to be the Prime Minister, Rob Jetten, young, gay, charismatic, liberal, absolutely just adore the guy. I think he's fantastic, and I think the Lib Dems have more to learn from him perhaps than Mamdani. Let's just end by saying a few words on Remembrance Sunday this coming Sunday. I both of my granddad's fought respectively in the two world wars. And I think we all have, going back in our families' relations that did so, and increasingly, Chris, obviously that they're sadly no longer in increasing numbers, no longer with us now, but nonetheless important to remember. Yeah.
Yeah, and I, my granddad served in the war, and my other granddad was in Korea, and earlier this year my nan passed away, who was in the WAF as well. So again, that just reminds that, especially from the World War II generation, unfortunately the numbers are dwindling quite significantly now. But it's also important to remember more recent conflicts, Iraq and Afghanistan, and all of the conflicts in between. And also it's important to remember that the prospect of war is always with us, and especially now, especially with tensions heightening with Russia, and we have all of this situation going on with drones and drone incursions into NATO airspace. So defence is important. We need to keep an eye on that. I mean, obviously, it's my job. It's my day-to-day job. But it is important to remember at this time of year the people who have served in the armed forces, are serving in the armed forces, and the sacrifices that everybody has made.
Tom?
Yeah, no, just to echo Chris, that the spirit of all the servants to our defence should be definitely remembered on Tuesday and on Sunday too.
Absolutely. Tom, it's been so good having you on. How did you find your debut? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, no, it was great to be on, and thank you again for having me.
Great, and you're fab. We'll really look forward to having you on again. It's it's really interesting to have different perspectives, and yes, I was just thinking there that whoever we have on, either me or Chris, are in the minority, but it's good because it challenges our views too. So that's good. Folks, please do all the internety things. Please like, please subscribe, please tell your friends. Please follow us on Twitter, X at Political Frenemies. We are slowly building. We're in a very crowded field, but our numbers are going up week by week, which is fantastic, and we really appreciate all of your support. And over the next few weeks, got some fantastic guests, some more fantastic guests lined up, some more new voices, as well as some returning ones as well. So please do stay tuned. And from Tom, from Chris, and from me, it's goodbye, and we'll see you next week on Political Frenemies.